Schools Board of Education on Tuesday, March the 12th, 2024. And the Board of Education acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of the Comox First Nations. We would like to thank them for the privilege of living on their land, the gift of working with their children. The first item on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Vice Chair Leslie.
Could I make an amendment to the motion? Could we take away 9A-B and drop that section in amending the adoption of the agenda?
Okay, that's the volunteer code of conduct section.
Yes, and so it might read now that the Board of Education School District 71 Comox Valley adopt the March 12th 2024 board meeting agenda as amended.
Is there a seconder for that? Thank you, Trustee Maysack. Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to the next agenda item is the board meeting minutes. Looking for a trustee to read and move this motion. Trustee Howe.
Sure, that the Board of Education of School District number 71 Comox Valley adopt the February 27th, 2024 regular public board meeting minutes as presented.
And a seconder. Trustee Aldinger, thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. We have no unfinished business, and the record of one in-camera meeting on February 27th, 2024. One next. Board chair report. Yes. I'd like to start off by welcoming our new Secretary Treasurer, Terry McVeigh, to our first public meeting. We're delighted to have you with us, and you're, I think, maybe just over a week in, and it's a real pleasure to have you with us, to join us with us tonight, and to join our district. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
And just a couple of highlights or reminders that I believe there's 2 more days to have the opportunity to provide input online for the strategic plan survey. And we thank all of the people who have taken the thoughtful time to for the submissions that we've already received. And I'd like to do a shout out for the district musicals, Something Rotten. It was raised at our last public meeting, and I know that there were probably many people in the room here tonight and online that attended that district musical, and it is a amazing compilation of not only bringing our students together from our high schools in our community, but the amazing work and dedication that they start in the fall to those amazing performances that were held last week. So I just want to thank everybody that was involved, and shouting out to those students, because I'm not sure sometimes how much sleep they got in those last few weeks, but I don't think it was very much. And everybody here knows that spring break is right around the corner, just a couple more days. And so feels weird to say it at the start of the meeting, but I will acknowledge that I hope you all have a restful and rejuvenating and exciting, if you can, spring break coming up for the next 2 weeks. Next, we have one presentation tonight, and the topic is critical incident response. I'll turn it over to our Associate Superintendent, John Lamoureux, to take it away with his team, with his presentation team.
Thank you very much, Chair Waite, members of the board. Thank you for inviting us here to present on critical incidents. I want to start just by introducing Tara Ryan. I think everyone here pretty much knows Tara, but Tara is vice principal for Inclusive Ed, but also a huge part of our critical incident team and has been for many, many years. So it's great to have Tara here, being able to answer all the difficult questions. The thing about critical incidents, it's one of those topics that you never want to see happen within a school, within a district, but you also recognize that they do. And so as a system, we have to be prepared to be able to provide the supports necessary for both staff, students, and even community when they do occur. This is a definition that our district has used for many years. I think we're going back to the Paul Berry, Esther Schatz days. And we followed, it's essentially that any event that negatively impacts the normal flow of a day for kids and for staff is something that we will support. And we do that either formally, okay? And formally being, it could be a situation like a homicide, an overdose, suicide. And that's when our actual team comes into the school and works really closely with the identified members of the school team. They know their kids best, they know their staff best. And so together, we plan and prepare to, best support the situation. In the last 3 years, we've had 22 incidents that we've supported, only 2 since September. So obviously post-COVID, it was, obviously a little bit harder. But like I said, the last 7 months, we've had 2 situations. Informal are something that Tara, Jill Katapsky, Carla, Lasota, and myself deal with on a regular basis. This is when we get a phone call, an email, a situation that kind of arises in a school, and the counselor, the admin, usually youth and family workers, sometimes ISW, they just need some support. And it could be an anniversary of something that had happened previously. It could be the death of a grandparent, even, a beloved pet. Okay, so we kind of balance both of those at the same time. Now, we're incredibly fortunate in our school and in our district because Kevin Cameron, who is, he's deemed a subject matter expert in trauma response and threat assessment. He has been to our district 4 times. We have a team in 2024 that are actually going to, I think it is Prince George, to be trained by Kevin to be able to come back and facilitate training on the island. And Kevin's been to our district 4 times previously. What Kevin does is he's trained all our counselors, he's trained all of our administrators, and he also acts as a resource for those really complicated situations in our district that occur. We can call him up, and he actually provides guidance for us. For those who don't know, Kevin runs the Center for Trauma and Informed Practice. It was his team that provided all the support for Tabor. The Humboldt bus crash. He was the lead for, I think it was Sandy Hook. And more recently, he's been doing all the training or a lot of the training for districts across Canada. So he's a huge resource for our district and still loves coming to the Comox Valley, as you can tell, for the 4 years that he's been here. And when he comes, he reviews our manual and helps to make sure that the decisions we're making are trauma informed. Within that system, we have a primary team and a secondary team. Our primary team consists of the superintendent, myself and Tara, and then Carla and Jill. And Tara and Jill are both registered clinical counselors. On the right-hand side is a secondary team, and that is Aaron Paul from Cumberland, Molly Dixon from Highland. And then we have 2 new people on the team this year, and that's Kim McWilliam and Christy Bratkowski. They're part of our ICY, our Integrated Child and Youth Care. So they're not actually teachers or within the system. They're hired by our district as part of that new initiative. They're actual mental health clinicians. So they are trained in therapeutic counseling. And so when we have situations that are very challenging, they can come in and do an 8 to 12 session with a family or with kids when those situations do come to fruition. The reason it's primary and secondary is with Tara's great work, anytime we get a phone call, and usually I'm lucky because I work with a great team, but it's Sunday night at 9 o'clock, we're processing till midnight. We're at a school 7 o'clock in the morning the next day. But one of the roles that Tara does is she'll go through and flag if the family, the students, flag if they have siblings, connections through staff, anything like that. And so for Monday, our secondary team will often be at the primary school. So the school where there possibly is a sibling or where there's a staff member that's left to be in a new school. So we balance all of that on the night before. And then when we come into a school that following day, we're in there early in the morning and we're meeting the school team. And this is the school team. At the start of the year, Associate Superintendent Dixon and myself get a list of the identified staff that are trained in critical incident or in VITRA. They submit it. We have a list of all of it. And what happens in situations like that is we do all the groundwork the night before. Tara's going to walk you through what that actually looks like when we go into a school. And then we kind of divvy up responsibilities between primary and secondary. And then I'll let Tara take over the actual incident response.
Thank you for having us here. It's nice to be back. I've been on the critical incidents response team for probably about 25 years now. I was trying to remember what my first call out was, and no two have ever been the same, for sure. In those early days when we first had our response team, we didn't have a manual and we didn't have a procedure, and we had several counselors who were just interested in diving in and helping people responding to a critical incident. And we would just wander the halls in the schools and check in with kids and check in with teachers. And since then, it's definitely been refined as a practice where we do have our response manual, which is so helpful to all of us in terms of, it doesn't matter how many incidents you've responded to, you still get that heartbeat going when you're walking in and not knowing who you're going to be working with and how you can be of help or what you're going to face. And so we, as Sean mentioned, often we hear about critical incidents late at night or on the weekend. Sunday night is probably the most common time we've had call outs. And so we scan the computer, we look for links on social media, we look up in MyEd, who are the relatives, who are the sisters and brothers and the parents and cousins who might be affected. We look for those roadside memorials that are actually on social media to find out who are the other kids who are at risk that we need to be touching base with tomorrow. And one of the great things that we've been doing in the most recent years is when we start in the morning, we come together as a team. And we sit as a team. We want to race out there and help right away, but having that time as a team just to check in with each other, find out who our team members are, what the issues are, who's the staff that we need to, look out for, and really be sensitive to the fact that if it's a student from that school or a staff member, oftentimes those people who we rely on in those schools aren't available to us because they're also grieving or they're also struggling. So just looking at our staff and our parents and the community and our students, and we make a plan from there. So who's going to be manning the office? Who's going to be debriefing with the staff? We come up with a script for staff members to share with their students if it's at that point. If we have the ability to share information, we decide at that point in time and discuss what information are we allowed to share. As you can imagine, some critical incidents have some very sensitive information that go along with them, and we want to make sure that what we're putting out there has been confirmed, that the family's given us permission to share it, and that we're in a position to quell any rumors that have gotten to the kids before us. Oftentimes they have all kinds of rumors that have come across social media, and so we want to dampen those, certainly to not cause any harm. And then once we have our plan in place, we usually have a snack area where kids can come in, and we have counselors in that area where they can check in. We do up a script for the admin assistants because oftentimes parents and community members start calling in and asking questions. So they're prepared with a unified script of what we're putting out into the community already. And then we just start our work. We go through the school. For me, it's often looking for kids who are on their own, kids who are hiding, kids who aren't part of a greater group, who aren't processing it together with other kids. It really depends on elementary versus high school, what kids need. We usually bring in substitute teachers, TOCs, so they're rotating through the classrooms if the teachers need to step out. spend some time with some of our counselors. We often call in a substitute admin assistant to help out in the office. So something this district has gotten really good at, in my experience, is really rushing support to where supports are needed. Sometimes we'll occasionally go out to the home if the family's asking for support for a sibling or for themselves. We'll go out into the community and support, just to be that front line and use the resources that we have to meet people with their needs. And then we check in at lunch with each other. We check in with senior management, let them know how it's going. If we need more counselors brought to the area, they're sent right away from other schools. We pull from schools who are doing well to schools who need that extra support. And people are great at just jumping right in and helping and supporting. Other times I've been in a library where we have food and kids just start coming, and we end up having a big group session on talking about who we've lost or talking about what the situation is, and getting those conversations started. And then towards the end of the day, we always follow up with kids and teachers. We have a debrief meeting with the staff. If we haven't already had one first thing in the morning, we check in with the staff to find out how they're doing. We provide resources to our students to follow up on, and resources for our staff as well if they need extra support. And then we make a call. Do it all over again tomorrow? Or does the school already have the resources they need to follow through? And with some students, we follow through for weeks if they need it, especially if we've had that happen in the summer a few times where kids can't access community resources. So we'll support them through the summer and into the fall, and just really try to provide what they need to get through those times, both them and their families.
The quick reference guide you see up there kind of gives our administration and our team just an insurance that we're not missing steps along the way. Because you can imagine right in the heat of the moment, there are always things that might, fall. And so, in the blue are things that our team covers, and that's making sure that, the CDTA knows, the QP knows, our administration board chair. We've worked with our administration on gathering facts and what to ask, the right questions for us to be able to follow up on. We've identified, and Tara's talked all about that. She's kind of followed the script. But this helps our administration and our school staff, because where we deal with it on a regular basis, for them, it'll be fairly new. And just having that there to be able to check off, done, ooh, forgot to call the superintendent, check that off, do. And as you go through, then you ensure that you're not missing something during a really difficult time. At the end of it, we'll always do a debrief with the staff that we've worked with, because we're always learning. So we'll sit there and go, what worked, what can we do differently, next time? Is there any suggestions that you have? We find that a lot of times we'll be supporting staff along the way, because these situations often bring up trauma in themselves of things that have happened as well along the way. So like I said, I'm really fortunate because we have a fantastic team. And originally when I went to my first critical incident in this district with Tara and all that, I thought I'd be taking a lead. Took me about 5-8 seconds in where I realized time for me to step back and let them run with it, because they're so good. And just little things, when we talk to the staff in the morning, Tara, Jill, and Carla will be watching the staff to see who's triggered while I'm supporting the administrator give the message. Little things like that make a huge difference, because then you can identify the staff, pull them out, work with them, and then, help support kids. These are the 3 questions that we get asked more than any. So I'll let Tara work through answering these.
So again, like I mentioned, every scenario is different, and we do have to have these discussions early on to make those decisions. So what support should staff and students expect during and after an incident? We get there as soon as we can, and there's no delineation between staff and students. Whoever needs help, we're there to help them. And that might just be a check-in. It might be, can I take you for a walk and relieve you from your class, to let's go find an office somewhere and spend some time together. We get there, as I said, as soon as we can. So during the incident, we're there to support. And then after the incident, we try to never leave anyone hanging. So if somebody needs ongoing support, we're there for ongoing support. We phone parents. We try to get fast-tracked referrals into local agencies if someone's looking for ongoing counseling. And as I mentioned, if that is impossible, we pick those kids up ourselves and we just continue to see them ourselves, particularly the registered clinical counselors and our ICY counselors, to provide those kids with therapy where they need them or support the family.
And our outside agencies are fantastic. We have an awesome relationship. We're all connected through CEL. So usually when an incident occurs, obviously through a smaller area, they're aware of it. I'll get a call from MCFD or I'll get a call from John Howard right away. And really the message is, what do you need? And they will do whatever. They'll open up space at their facility to bring students, staff, parents, or they will come down to, our facilities as well. So it's really a symbiotic and a very nice, strong relationship.
And we do meet with our community partners on a regular basis. Sean sits with them at the ICY table. I sit with them at the primary years mental health table. So we do talk about the mental health and supports in the community and make those connections. So we're really fortunate in our community to be quite tight-knit with our community partners. When are staff contacted and or informed about an incident? If something happens on a weekend and we find out about it Sunday night, they are notified to come in for a meeting in the morning before school starts. And as Sean mentioned, we meet before that to determine what information are we allowed to share. If we haven't been able to reach out to the family, again, it depends. If it was a situation where several of our students were in an accident, we've talked a lot about this, then we own the information. If it was, the information about the accident, but we don't own information about personal health. So we might not be able to release that someone has passed away until we've talked to the family about that. So we do contact the staff and we try to let them know in person at a meeting before school and have those supports in place already. And then we just give them the information that we've had confirmed that we're allowed to release.
And one of the gray areas with this is we realize that we have to provide staff with some information even without a release. Because if they have students who are crying in their class, they need to know that their support's there and that there's not a situation that they're going to handle differently. So even in our meeting, if we don't have a release from the RCMP or if we don't have a release from a legal guardian or a parent or a spouse, we'll say there has been an incident. All right. If you see a student in your class who's really struggling, let one of our counselors know immediately and we'll come down. And then the minute we have information, sometimes it's by lunch, we can pull all staff in and share them that information or the next day. So.
And when are parents contacted about an incident? Again, it's tricky. Sometimes it's that day where we'll send a notice home or an email home to all the parents if that's applicable. Again, depending on what we are allowed to release. And it also depends if it's the death of a staff member, for example, then that's something once we have released to share that information, we would share that as soon as we can. And for other situations, sometimes we have to wait until the next day because we just don't have that permission and we're focused on helping the kids and working with the family. And then it might not be until the next morning. If kids are impacted that day, if it's just in one class, we would contact the parents and say, we've had counselors supporting kids in your class today. This is what we've done. If you notice any issues at home tonight, please let us know. We'll be happy to be back tomorrow and help out. Sometimes it's not all the information that the parents want to know, but that's just because we don't always have permission to release it right away.
If it's a parent directly, it's their son or daughter, they obviously get informed immediately. What Tara's talking about is if a situation occurs within a class, right? And say a teacher passes away, then we have to support the class as a whole. And it's different if the teacher's been in that school for 10 years versus they've been there for 2 months. And it's a secondary school where kids rotate versus 30 kids in an elementary. So all of those are handled differently. Besides for that, Any questions?
Trustee Maysack?
I'm curious, since this has been a real evolution for this manual, what are your thoughts on the healing process of our students and how the change in recovery after incidents with these kind of supports in place? And are you seeing an impact on that with being able to get them into the counseling, and have this support and, and this holistic approach? Do you see those impacts?
I think that's a great question. I think when I even started this and was doing my counseling training, I always had the notion that every little bit of help I can do is still one drop in the bucket. So it's a little bit more that I can help that wouldn't have been there if I wasn't there, or wouldn't have been there if our team wasn't there. I think in the early days when I first started, we were just less organized and we kept making mistakes. So we forgot to inform the teacher who was on leave for a year and would be impacted, and they would have had to find out a different way. Or we didn't notify the family that took this week off. And so we were dropping balls in different places, but I think we were still providing an excellent service for the kids who were in the school. So I think with the development of this manual, we've just gotten better at making sure we're not dropping those balls, and that we have a way to follow up. Okay, who were those kids, and how do we follow up? And okay, Carla, you've got that one, and I'll check in with this one. So we have a better process in place. So I think we're just spreading the support wider than we did before. But we always did have that piece of connect with as many kids as you can and follow up as much as you can. I just don't think we were as broad in our support as we are now. Does that answer?
And just kind of add a little bit, like when we go to a school in the morning, because the staff know the kids so well, and the staff will take on certain responsibilities based on the strengths of that school, just to make sure that we don't miss anyone. And then we actually mark within our calendar anniversary dates and follow-ups and things to do, which we've actually never done in the past. For those who've been around for a long time, the message back then was toughen up, buttercup. And, now we see it from a totally different lens. And Kevin Cameron has just opened things up to be able to consistently remind us what's important. Not only that, is support for us for some of these times. When he'll add something that maybe we've missed or something like that. So it's nice to have that as an overarching theme as well.
Yeah, I think if I can just add one last thing to that is, I think as counselors and therapists in general, we've become better at being more trauma invested in our work. And so instead of just how do we get you over this hump to get you back in school and moving forward, we do focus more on what can we do right now to help you feel safe and avoid or minimize the likelihood of this turning into a lifelong trauma for you. And so part of that is the evolution of the manual, but I think part of that is also just the evolution of counseling and therapy and us knowing more about trauma and how it impacts kids. Thanks.
Trustee McConnell-Keen?
Sure. Excuse me. Through the chair to whoever would like to say. My question would just be, I appreciated the information around communication, specifically at the school level, and understanding how the primary, secondary, and communications team would be able to work together. My question is around sort of understanding that you want to reduce stigma, reduce increased risk of something going forward, and honor the confidentiality of the circumstance. What do you see as being more district communication? Like, what would that, I don't need specifics, but when would it become district communication in terms of incident or threat assessment or risk that's involved? Like, that's a broad question. I'm just curious, when is it school level communication versus district level?
Oh, I see.
And you can, whoever would like to answer that, I'm just a bit curious.
I'm not sure, Trustee McCannell, I'm understanding the question. Within the process, our communication person, Craig in this case, and the superintendent are aware right at the start. And our belief as a system, as well as a district, is more communication is better. It's one of the issues for us is who holds that information at that time and has the legal ability to actually release it. So sometimes it's a police involved, and we'll provide a little bit to our teachers to ensure our kids are supported, but not by breaking the confidence. In some cases, it's a spouse who has to release permission about a tragedy that's happened. And so each kind of situation is different. I know that in all situations through the superintendent, the board chair finds out right away that we're dealing with a situation at a school. And then they're kind of unique. Whenever possible, we communicate as much as we can.
No, that makes sense. I guess I meant with question 3 being when do the parents, but like, obviously there's hopefully rare circumstances where you're messaging the broader district, but in that case, and that makes sense to me, I understand.
And with parents, if we have kids in the class that are directly impacted, our counselors actually call the parents individually and talk to them. Sometimes we've done situations where we've sent a note just to the class saying that a situation has occurred. If you notice something with your son or daughter, feel free to talk to them or call Tara to get something, or to call Jill or to, in other cases where it's a much greater impact. And we'll use our trauma-informed kind of background, but we'll actually defer a lot to the school to say, your community, your staff, your students, how do we collectively work together to ensure we have supports for, as many as possible. So,
thank you.
Any other questions from trustees? Trustee Aldinger?
I'm curious in part, I know that we received part of the manual last year. I have a couple of pages printed out. Is it something that's available online publicly, or is it mostly just the informed team that has access to it?
It's a great question. It's not available publicly, and the reason for that is it's confidential information as contact information. But it is available. We have a system within the school district, which is called Teams. And even the one you have wouldn't be the most current one because unless it's gone on it. I think the bottom was either August or September.
2023.
Yeah, 23, because we updated, because we changed the people who were on it. This year we've added the mental health clinicians with a new superintendent. So that information continually changes. And then, like last time I met with Kevin was in May when he was here. So he goes through our manual and says, we've learned this, we need to add this. And so it's always a work kind of in progress. But every August when we meet with our admin team, we let them know, go through this. Terry does the same thing with all the counselors. Any changes are highlighted, things like that. So it's not actually available to the public, but it is there to anyone within the leadership of our district.
Can I ask one more? We have time?
Checking to see if any other trustee that hasn't had a question yet has their hand raised. And if not, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm curious also about just like how the assessment is made that a situation falls into a critical incident as opposed to some other category, which I'm assuming is something's happened to one person and it's only affecting that one person or a very small group of students. Like at what point is it more of a private matter and extent? And you've given a few examples, like if a teacher who's been around, in the district has a lot of connections in the school, that's something that would affect an entire school community. But I imagine there are a lot of other situations where, I don't know, like 5 or 10 students might be impacted, like they were the ones at the party or they were the ones who have been reached out to. And so it's more than 1 or 2, but it's not the entire school community. Like how does that fall in?
And it's a great question, and there is no black and white answer, but here's the process that occurs. I'll either take a phone call or Tara will take a phone call, and immediately we'll communicate between each other. And we'll do all the work because we've trained our administrators to ask the questions on who's involved, when did it occur, how did it occur, who's the ripple effect. Tara does an unbelievable job of doing all the connections through my head to be able to find out who is directly involved. And then when we meet our school team at 6 in the morning, 6:30, we have their expertise to sit here and go, who are staff that are going to be impacted? Who are kids that are going to be impacted? And as that gets bigger, we move from primary to secondary. Sometimes we'll get a call and the principal go, and I'll go, okay, if you need anything, here's Tara's cell, here's Carla's cell. Sometimes they'll get a phone call, they're there 20 minutes later. Sometimes they handle it on their own, depending on the situation. Sometimes it'll be beyond their scope of what they thought it was, because all of a sudden they realize, oh my goodness, this is so much more, and the team is all on standby. So when a situation occurs, our primary is ready to go immediately, our secondary know, and their principals know that we'll call them in a sec, and we'll move them, and we'll shuffle people within the district to be able to meet that need. So we'll always err on over-supporting.
And we've done that several times where we call in TOCs and they end up not being needed, but we have them still walking the hallways of the school. I'll also add to Sean's answer that it really is based on need and that situation. So in one school, we might have one family who's impacted, but the counselor has also been impacted by that. And they're like, I got to tap out. I can't do this one. I can't work this one. And then they'll call in one of us. So in that situation, it might just be one family who's impacted, but they'll draw from the critical incident team. But if the counselor is good, and we always talk about, you got to check in with yourself and make sure that you're okay if you're going to help, your students and staff. If the counselor's okay, then principals will say, I think we're good for the day, and we'll call you in if needed. So we're just on standby. So it could be one, it could be a whole class who's impacted and the counselor feels okay about it, and then we won't come in.
Thanks.
Question.
Thank you. Thank you for all the thoughtful questions, and really appreciate having this presentation for the board and for the public who is participating virtually or live to listen to tonight. And thank you for all this great and often quiet behind the scenes work that's done in terms of critical incident responses and all layers, inclusive education. Okay. Next, I'm looking for a trustee to move the motion connected to this presentation. Vice Chair Leslie?
The Board of Education School District 71 Comox Valley received the critical incidents briefing note as presented.
And a seconder? Trustee Howe? Any comments, questions, discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Down, and that's carried. Thank you. Next, for information, and get your pens ready for those of you who are following the agenda closely. The next open committee of the whole meeting is April 9th. That hasn't changed in our agenda package. There's an addition to the topic area. So there are two topic areas, strategic plan and budget process overview, and you will find that link to the budget process overview further on in the agenda as we go through it. So just a heads up to everybody that that's at 7 o'clock here on April the 9th, strategic plan and budget process overview. And next I will move to our strategic direction section of our agenda and turn it over to the superintendent for first item in this agenda section.
Yeah, thank you. I do have a few agenda items tonight, and I'm always it feels auspicious to be placed under strategic direction. So hopefully that is the delivery tonight. There's some strategic direction for sure. But I do want to just follow up to Tara and Sean and the other members of our critical incident team, the incredible gratitude and the weight and the gratitude for the work you do and the weight and responsibility that comes with holding that phone that will ring at any time and you'll be called to support. And having been on both sides of a critical incident as a district administrator as well as a site-based, I know the incredible relief and gratitude on the ground when there's other people supporting those critical incidents. So thank you for that work. And I agree with Trustee Wade. A lot of it happens behind the scenes and is not necessarily known, but deeply appreciated and very impactful to our staff and to our children and to their families. I do recognize that I have extensive opportunity tonight to speak to everyone. I get the opportunity to talk about Feeding Futures, the 3-year calendar, as well as an update to strategic plan. So I'm going to keep my my update brief. I do want to just say it's an irony that when fine arts are so alive and well in our district that we have a title of something rotten when something is so awesome. But I do want to express Tonight, my gratitude to the nearly 500 people who have, as of this morning, taken part and taken the time to complete the survey, which is there to support the board in the development of their strategic plan. And this is reflective of what I have observed in my journey here in the Comox Valley Schools, which is a community who is deeply engaged in the creation of an optimistic future and are committed and willing to engage in the work of necessary system change to meet the needs of our learners more fully. And as we move towards a new strategic plan and direction and a new vision, I am full of hope for the future of our students in the Comox Valley Schools. And I would like to wish all of our students and staff an awesome spring break. I'll move on to the next area.
Sorry, I missed my cue. Is that everything, Superintendent, on your verbal report?
It is.
Okay, great. Moving on to the next item of the agenda. It's the Feeding Futures District Scan recommendation, briefing note, and presentation.
Excellent. Yes, I don't think that picture is unintentional. Those are two very involved members of our food and school community. I would like to start by acknowledging the great work done by Kyle Timms and Yolanda Layton in the completion of the food scan. As a result of that work that was done, we were able to engage and facilitate meaningful discussions, as well as explore recommendations. There's clearly high engagement in our community around this opportunity. And I am excited that the Feeding Futures money, $1.14 million to our district over this next 3 years, will improve and expand our food programs. I also want to share that we did have a community evening that's with internal partner groups that was building off the food scan and which has led to the recommendations that are here tonight. So I believe these recommendations are reflective of what we heard in that conversation and builds on the excellent work in the food scan. So I'm going to read these in detail. There is more information than it's on the slide. So the first recommendation, and we will be looking for a motion tonight as a result of these recommendations. There's 5 recommendations, just so you can, keep the adrenaline in check as we go through it. But the first recommendation is around staffing, which is to hire a 12-month full-time excluded food services coordinator. The food service coordinator is intended to work closely with inclusive ed, Indigenous education, school-based administration to help establish best practices for identifying students with food security concerns. As well, the food services coordinator will be supervised by the Secretary Treasurer as a business services department member. The second recommendation for consideration tonight is the formation of an advisory committee. This is the Feeding Futures Advisory Committee, be established with representation from internal partner groups, rights holders, and invited external community members and organizations. Community school representation shall be included as an internal partner group. An advisory committee terms of reference would be developed over the coming months and presented to the board at a future regular meeting, which would include, with these recommendations, the terms of reference will include Indigenous perspectives, consideration of specific Feeding Futures District Scan recommendations, garden-based learning framework, and land-based learning. The third recommendation is to complete this year funding cycle with the Feeding Futures money, and that is to allocate the remaining $550,000 as outlined in the slide. And so that will sustain significant investment in our schools to the end of this year, as well as you'll see the staffing costs that will be reflective of a hopeful hiring with a few months to go before the end of this fiscal year. The fourth recommendation tonight for consideration of the board is around food procurement. The intention is for the food services coordinator to consult with the advisory committee to present an integrated food procurement strategy. Recommendations shall consider existing infrastructure limitations and should follow best provincial practices pertaining to requests for proposal, buying local, and food nutrition. And then lastly, the fifth consideration tonight is for the food services coordinator to consult with an advisory committee, with the advisory committee on the budget for the program allocation for the 24-25 school year. Staff shall present a final recommendation for the board's consideration at the June 2024 regular board meeting. Those are the recommendations that I'm bringing forward to trustees tonight for consideration.
Now entertaining questions from the
Yes, I would
trustees?
take questions.
Okay, so I saw trustee Masak and then trustee Caton.
I was going to move the motion, so if there's any
No,
other.
first it's discussion. It's questions? You have no questions?
No.
Okay, so trustee Caton?
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I do have a question and I guess clarification on why we're allowing a 10,000 advisory committee budget. That's something that's new, and I just have some understanding as why that $10,000 for an advisory committee to the board budget is there. So just some clarification.
Thank you. That's an estimated budget. What it is intended to do is allow for the opportunity to provide release time for an internal partner group. So if we need to backfill with release days, depending on who those folks are. And so just to provide that estimated budget, but an opportunity for that staff coordinator to facilitate those meetings as soon as possible.
Just to follow up. So my understanding is that if school district staff are part of the budget advisory committee and they have to leave their classroom or their job, this is to backfill them to ensure that they're able to participate with any detriment to their students or their service at their other job. And that's why.
Thank you. That's a more thorough explanation of what I attempted to answer.
Okay,
I would also add remuneration or honorariums as well for potential external partnerships.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Checking to see if there are any other trustees that have a question or comment. Trustee Aldinger?
This question concerns the advisory committee that's being recommended. There's mention of internal partner groups, rights holders, and invited external community members and organizations. The Family Affordability Fund, that was the initial kind of incarnation of the advisory committee, had, I think there were one or two trustees. So I'm curious whether one or two trustees will also be part of the advisory committee as well.
Thank you for the question. When we talked about internal partner groups, that would be reflected by having trustees as part of that internal recognition.
That one? Any further questions or comments? So before we move to the motion, I just also like to thank everybody for their incredible hard work and for all of the work that our many layers of community have put into this important issue in our community. And thank you, Superintendent, for walking this way with us in our district. It's an important item. So now I'm looking for a trustee to move, I'm going to call it a mighty motion, and I know that's not in Robert's rules at all, but it's a lengthy recommendation on page 11 of the agenda package. And so trustee Masak, would you like to read the motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education of School District Number 71, Comox Valley, approve the superintendent recommendations contained herein.
Thank you. And looking for a seconder, trustee Aldinger. Any discussion on the motion of the mighty recommendations? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. And again, mighty is not a Robert's Rules technical term. It's the best one I could come up with at the time. Next, your third item tonight under the superintendent section of the agenda is the three-year district calendar and presentation that the trustees were handed out, and I believe there were handouts for the public portion of the meeting. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just will connect just for a brief moment back to now that those recommendations are approved, we hope to have a job posting out very shortly. And I would also say this food coordinator, when we hire them, will be off to a great start because of the materials that have been generously provided by our internal partner groups. And I would also, at this moment, like to let Deepak know I have 4 binders that are ready for pickup, having now retrieved that information out of the binders. So I do want to express my gratitude for the engagement and for the materials that will really get that new coordinator off to a great start. All right, the 3-year calendar, well, 3 one-year calendars. So we call it a 3-year calendar. One of the pieces that I just want to start with is just acknowledging some shortcomings. One is recognizing that we've heard from some parents who really need to know what's happening in more advanced notice for the upcoming years. So families that are needing to make holiday arrangements and book things and have that knowledge in advance. So I just wanted to make a public commitment that we will do our next series of 3-year calendars in the 25-26 school year, so that we never are doing the 3-year calendar while one is expiring. We'll do it in the second year of the 3-year process. So, and that is some reflective of some of the feedback that we've been hearing and some of the urgency from parents wondering where the calendars are. So I'm going to go through a brief piece around some of the feedback that we've received. I mentioned earlier that we had a strategic plan survey with almost 500 comments or people that have filled it in. It's a very consuming, it's a difficult survey, and so folks have really committed to that. We did receive 36 comments in response to these calendars, which we actually, even though there's not a lot of comments, that it actually lead to a couple of changes. Oh, I got it, sorry. So just knowing that calendars need to meet the minimum number of hours, that boards have the autonomy to determine the end and start, the length of school days, the number of non-instructional days, and the individual school timetables. So the feedback, we had, like I said, 36 comments, and it's interesting because when you receive comments, you hear about somebody's gratitude for the placement of the holidays and somebody else's concern with it. And so there were a number of comments that were concerned just about the overall amount of holidays and disruption to families, both through childcare lens, and a few comments too concerned about the loss of instructional time because of a 2-week break over winter break and a 2-week spring break. There was some pieces, and I think one of the things that comes from doing the calendar is things like a recognition. Another thing we need to do a better job of within our system is articulating and clearly sharing what happens during professional development days, because they're a robust, critical component of the transformations we need to make in our system. But they're not well understood and often seen as a day off and a disruption to families. And so we recognize that we have some more work to do around sharing the good work and the good learning that our educators are doing on those days. Concerns just about, and we had earlier conversations with the calendar committee around placement of professional development days, potentially not just always on a Monday, Friday, but clearly hearing from parents that would cause some disruption, difficulty with childcare. So all of the professional development days in the 3-year calendar are placed connected to a weekend. One of the things that we did here, and we heard it from our Pro-D committee, is that there was some real difficulty in making arrangements for professional development opportunities, particularly in our larger sites, when the Family Day weekend tends to have a number of sporting events occurring. And so we actually, based on the feedback, that's one of the things that we changed. So the original draft that the public weighed in on had a professional development day on the Friday prior to the Family Day weekend, and it is now on the Tuesday. So it still connects for those families that are able or able to do that longer break, but will allow for families to, or for the professional development day to be have space, vacant space within our district. And I just want to spend a minute on the last bullet. It's reflective of a few comments saying the calendar as it is was for, we no longer need a calendar that has 2 months off for harvest and a month for, or a week or 2 weeks off for planting. And the conversation around, is there some willingness to engage in a conversation around looking at things like a 4-day school week a year-round calendar, and I'd be excited to move our calendar conversation away from simply the profound placement of a Pro D Day on a Friday or a Monday to a more robust discussion around how can we as a system be entrepreneurial with our time and potentially look at some structural shifts, not en masse to replace one system with another system, but within this system, are there some ways that we can start to shape ourselves to the growing request for some flexible ways that schooling can be delivered? And so obviously there's a lot connected to that. It's work with our internal, with our unions, with our internal groups, with parents, but really open to that possibility of exploring what are some different ways that we could look at being entrepreneurial with our time. Again, just recognizing, I think another component. Oh, well, here's where I should be.
You want me to move that slide?
No, this is great. This is what I was just talking about. So here we are. We're almost on this slide. Yeah. So, but just to note, yeah, I've lost that piece there. Where was I going? Somewhere really remarkable. But there's the piece around just needing to look at our calendar to see if it can reflect more modern needs. Something's missing there.
There's a slide.
There's a slide missing. Yeah, I got.
At the end.
He's looking.
Regardless, we have 3 one-year calendars to look at. We made that one change from what the public had weighed in on, and so we'll be looking for a motion for approval of these 3-year calendars. And if there's any questions,
Okay, great. So looking to see if there's any. Trustee Caton.
So thank you. Thank you. And as a trustee observer sitting on that and being an observer on the calendar committee over many years, the question always comes up, and I think you touched on it, with the respect that many of our families, affordability, daycare, and we're having a 2-week spring break, and they're actually having more days off in a year. And how do we support those families? And there was a consideration, or could there be a consideration through the Feeding the Futures? And I know some districts are doing on-site daycare, and that is there something that as a district we can maybe look at supporting some of our families that will be in need in the fact that they actually have more days off in the past, and how can we support them as we move forward? Because that's one of the greatest questions we had over the years is tough enough as it is, and to get daycare is next to impossible. And some of those students, their food is what they have at school, and now they're off for an extra few days. So I'm just wondering, as a district, what we can do, or what commitment we say, could we look and have that conversation?
you know, Janice, I'm not sure how you're completing me tonight, but thank you, because that's what I was looking to share and forgot. That's where I got lost, which was around part of the conversation in the calendar committee meeting was people's biggest concern about the spring break piece was the fact that there's a difficulty accessing childcare and programming for students. So there was a conversation in that committee around the possibility of being able to facilitate some programming during spring break held by some support staff that might not be paid otherwise, and make that accessible. And so, yes, is the answer in short. I think the other component is around that food security piece and really identifying, as that the motion indicates, really getting a good handle on who our most needy students are so that we provide some additional food security while those breaks are happening. So thank you for that. That's exactly what I dropped there. So I appreciate the question.
The mystery of the missing slide was solved. I think it was a verbal slide.
Yeah, that's it.
That's great. Thank you. Any more trustees with questions or comments? Seeing none, looking for a trustee to turn to the first page of the district calendar document to move the recommendation. Would you like to read it for us, please? Trustee McConnell-Keen.
Yes. I will move that the Board of Education of School District Number 71, Comox Valley Schools, approve the 2024, 2025, 2026, and the 2026-2027 school calendars as presented.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder. Chair Leslie. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you, and a big thank you to the district calendar committee for wrestling 3 years for us so that we can plan. I mean, that sometimes it changes anyways, correct? Yeah, right. Okay, so moving on through, and the beginning of the meeting, we struck out the section regarding the, sorry, I was ahead of myself, my apologies. The fourth item for the superintendent tonight is a verbal update on the strategic plan.
I do, again, I would echo Chair Waite's comments of welcoming Carrie, and it's not always that I get 4 in a row, so I just want to make sure you're aware that we usually are a little bit more back and forth. So I just wanted to provide a quick verbal update around the strategic planning process. Again, my gratitude that we've had almost 500 people complete the survey, that we have an opportunity for parents and community members to engage around some dialogue on April the 3rd at Cumberland, April the 4th at Aspen Park, April the 8th at Lake Trail, as well as on Zoom, and April 15th for Indigenous families at the Comox Band Hall. And so we're hopeful that all of this information and conversations that I'm having in schools with staff and with students and other focus groups will really be used to shape a new vision and a new future for our schools. Speaking of a new vision, I just wanted to share that trustees spent last Tuesday evening working on the beginning of a process to shape a new mission, a new vision, and anchoring ourselves in a deeply understood group of value statements. So that work has begun, and I look forward to being able to share that work as it iterates and emerges over the next number of months. We are going to be investing significantly in having a number of people together to share in the data and to really work together to help trustees with the writing of the strategic plan. So trustees have authored or authorized the opportunity for internal members of our learning community to work together looking at the raw data to help shape an action plan around learning in our district. So I'm looking forward to that process, and certainly the work that people have invested in through the giving of their time through the strategic plan, through the importance of those parent engagement nights, will really have a fundamental impact on the direction the district takes over the next number of years. So that's why.
Are you entertaining questions?
Sure.
Just checking. Seeing none now, I will move on, I believe, to E, which is Secretary Treasurer component of the agenda. Acknowledging, if I didn't fully acknowledge of the one section of the agenda package tonight regarding volunteer code of conduct.
If you move to page 36 of your agenda package, there's a briefing note with regards to the budget. So it's the last page. And looking this evening for a recommendation for the board to approve the budget timeline that's on the very last page. But in terms of background, each year at the March public board meeting or earlier, the board approves the annual budget timelines. That also includes the process and schedule for engagement with local community and education partners. The main consultations for the annual budget will be conducted within the open committee of the whole structure so that the entire board, education partners, and the public are aware of the input that's been considered in the budget process. And annually, the school districts are required to submit a balanced budget to the ministry by the end of June 30th to be specific. And that budget has to be compiled and passed by way of bylaw with the board through 3 readings. But in terms of the actual timeline, it's very similar to last year. We will do a consultation process between April 24th and May 3rd. And if there is an opportunity to align some of the feedback that we received during the strategic plan process, we will align that, because the budget needs to be deeply tied to our strategic plan.
Thank you. And if any trustees have any questions? Seeing none, looking for a trustee to read and move the motion.
Board of Education of School District Number 71, Comox Valley, approve the budget timeline as outlined.
For a second, for trustee McConnell-Key. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Next, is board standing committee reports. For information, there was no there was no open committee of the whole meeting in February. We have moving on in the agenda, no board business to share in written. No board correspondence. And I'm moving on now to number 13, the public question period to the board. I don't believe I've received any emails from the public. So seeing no emails from the public, I will remind the public in attendance today that the public question period is 15 minutes in length, and wondering if any members of the public here tonight have any questions to direct to the board chair. One question at a time. And then we'll check to see if the public here tonight has any questions as well. Talked about the semicolons before, I think. But go for it.
Okay. Thanks. Through the board chair, thank you very much. We found the critical incident presentation to be very interesting. It's great information, thank you. And through the chair, maybe we could request from the superintendent that that presentation come to a DPAC meeting, and we can have a conversation at DPAC and educate those parents so that be able to educate their school communities.
The answer is absolutely. We'll just set up a time, which month.
And does the public have any other questions? Ed? And would you like to actually identify yourself as well?
No. Jen Fisher of DPAC chair.
Thank you.
Through the board again, through the superintendent, in regards to the critical incident presentation that we very much appreciated. You'll forgive us, know the least amount. So I was just hoping you could run through the terminology around the words critical incident. I know there's a definition, but for people that aren't in the know, does this refer to a sudden death or accidental tragedy, but also refer to incidences in school? If you could just provide some, that would be helpful for us.
Yes, it can for both.
Okay.
So depending on how the incident, how public it is, what the impacts are. So that's part of those gray areas where we identify depending on those characteristics.
And I think Trustee Ellinger asked a variation of that question, and we also had some response as well. It sounds like it's just, there's not one clear definition, is what I'm hearing. Any further questions from the public in the room or online? Okay. Seeing none, it is 8:14, and I'm looking for trustee to move adjournment. Vice Chair Leslie.
That the Board of Education of School District 71, Comox Valley, adjourn this meeting.
Seconder. Trustee Maysack.
All those in favor? Carried.